Four nations facing off. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another edition of the Benchwarmer Sports podcast. I'm Raffi, joined by Davian. Davian, did you know that four nations are facing off right now? And if you haven't been told four nations are facing off, four nations are facing off. And now we're down to two nations, Canada and USA. We're recording this Wednesday night, Thursday night, 7 Central, USA Canada for the Four Nations Faceoff trophy. Davian, I'm not going to say anything first because we all know what my thoughts are like going to be. As someone who is not as into hockey as I am, but still relatively into hockey, what have your thoughts been about this tournament? But before then as well, how are you doing? If you want to answer that first.
Yeah, Rafi. I've been doing great. Kind of just enjoying this somewhat quiet period in the sports world. It's right after the Super Bowl. During the All Star weekend for the NHL and the NHL and the NBA. But just really enjoying everything and very much so enjoying this Four Nations face off. It's been amazing. When we compare the level of play and the physicality of the game from this year compared to last year, where you had the four different teams really competing against each other, it's night and day. What we saw against in the U.S. Canada game the other day is something we see on the international level because these players are recognizing that they're representing their country and that they're playing for a much larger purpose than some new tournament or trophy like we have seen in the NBA All Star game, and why that format needs to change because it's just players aren't taking it seriously. Fans aren't taking it seriously, but the fans love the Four Nations. I love the Four Nations. You love the Four Nations. And I can't wait for the championship game where blood is going to be drawn. This U.S. Canada team were going at it at each other the last game, especially after the booing of the U.S. national anthem after from the Canadian fans. The U.S. wants to win badly, especially in Boston. Home field advantage. You have the rowdy Boston crowd. The stadium is going to be electric. This game is going to be amazing, and I can't wait for tomorrow night. We're currently recording on Wednesday, so I cannot wait for tomorrow night to see this game happen.
100%. And I'm glad you share a similar sentiment to me because I love hockey. And for the most part, whatever the NHL puts out there, I'm going to watch it. I'm going to like it. And I foolishly, very foolishly, went into this thinking, I don't know, like we'll see how into it the players are. The players talked about, yeah, like we're gonna give it our all, yeah, we're gonna put an effort, etc. But after almost 9 years without international hockey and seeing this tournament, I'm like, well, the playoffs are coming up soon. Our players are gonna really want to like take the chance, take those extra hits. And then I saw Canada versus Sweden, and I was like, okay, these players are, yeah, no, they're definitely going all out, and they are trying to injure one another, which, as much as you may not like, is also, it makes the product extremely entertaining. And then, as you said, USA Canada, I there was nothing in my mind out of all the possible starts to that game. If you had told me three fights in 9 seconds, I I would never ever predict that. Start the game, immediate puck drop. Matthew Tkachuk and Brandon Hagel, Blackhawks legend, go at it. Brandon Hagel kind of wins that fight, but it was a great fight. Brady Tkachuk, Matthew Tkachuk's brother, Bash Bro Styles, he fights Sam Bennett right after the next puck drop. Brady Tkachuk, David, I don't know if you saw it, but Brady Tkachuk going to the penalty box, daps up his brother in what might have been the most iconic. That was so iconic, that dap up, and just Matthew Tkachuk like banging on the glass to watching his brother in that fight. It was epic. And then it's like, okay, we're chilling now. Okay, let's get into the game. No, 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 no. JT Miller is like, you know what? I don't like the way you're looking at me, Colton Parayko. Colton Parayko is 6'5", by the way. And JT Miller is just like, I'm going to beat you up. You know what? You kind of look like Elias Pettersson. I want to beat you up. And that's just insane. And then finally, like, the game started. And it's funny because the joke always goes, like, I went to a fight and a hockey game broke out. And that's literally what happened at this game. So I've really loved this tournament. They have completely exceeded my expectations of what I could have possibly thought this tournament would be. And I'm very, on one hand, I would have loved to see Canada blow that game versus Finland. and missed the championship game. But on the other hand, over 4 million people were watching USA Canada in the US. USA Canada rematch, people on the internet saw all those highlights. The Four Nations Faceoff completely overshadowed the NBA All-Star game and the skills competition. And people saw that, and now they're gonna have a second chance to watch USA Canada. Davian, this is the NHL has not done a lot of good things. Well, they've not done made a lot of smart decisions. This game, this Four Nations Face-Off tournament was one of the greatest ideas they've had in at least a decade. And to those who missed out on USA Canada the first time in the US, they're going to be watching this game, and I think viewership is probably going to be in the 6-7 million. Because what else is going to be on Thursday night? Not many other sports are going to be on, and people are going to have major FOMO right now after seeing already what was an insane game on Saturday night between these two countries.
Yeah, I mean, I watched that game. I sadly kind of started watching it a bit late, so I missed all the fire that you kind of described. But what I saw was a level of play that I, I usually don't even see it during a regular season game. It felt like a playoff game where there was something to play
100%.
for, really. And so, I'm really excited. I think that the NHL has done a very good job with this. I think that some of their commercials I've seen, we talk about marketing. Like, we're not like I'm a business student, right, Rafi? So this is kind of my forte. You know, like seeing the commercials they've been putting out, the marketing that they've been doing, it's been getting better year by year, right? Last year, the format was not great, but you saw better viewership because they brought in a great, like a great artist like Tate McRae to perform during the wow, I'm fumbling over my words.
Intermission.
Yeah, I mean, well, she makes me fumble
Intermission.
over my words, but yeah, over the intermission, really, we saw her perform, and that got a lot of buzz, got a lot of people watching. So, I think it's great to see what the NHL is doing, and I really hope that the NBA is somehow able to emulate a similar format or really change up their format because right now it's just not working.
Yeah, and before we move on to NBA All Star Game, we'll do a little bit more talking about that. I'd like to hear your thoughts because I, as expected, did not watch any of it. The main thing that I watched, anyways, in years past for the NBA All Star Game, not even the dunk contest. I feel like that's gone pretty stale. It's the 3 point contest because I love when players chuck up threes, which has also unfortunately been a detriment to the NBA lately, I feel. But before we move on to that, Davian, I feel like this is a ridiculous question to ask you. But tomorrow night, USA Canada. This podcast is going up after, but make your pick. Who do you have winning the Four Nations face off? The United States of America or Canada?
I mean, there's not even a debate. Of course, it's gonna be Team USA. I mean, Quinn Hughes coming back. He's gonna put up such a performance. He saw like he. I bet he watched that game on Saturday and was like, "Man, I can't believe I'm missing out on this." And just like that, he healed up. And oh wait, actually, correction, he will not be joining.
Yeah,
Okay,
unfortunately, Quinn Hughes is not joining the
wow.
team. There
Okay,
was,
I'm sorry.
don't worry, a lot of people went through that roller
Right,
coaster
right.
this
Okay,
morning,
Rob,
Dave.
because I'm
I
going through this roller
included.
coaster right now because I'm just checking my news sites over here. Apologies. Either way, even without Quinn Hughes, it's the home field advantage. Team USA is coming off such great momentum. I think they're really going to win this. They're going to lock this down, and I can't wait to see them play. I know that there are some injuries that the Team USA is dealing with, but I think that they'll be able to surpass them and be able to win.
Yeah, a lot. Apparently, there's been a flu bug going around. And Charlie McAvoy got an infection from a shoulder injury, which is just awful to hear. He plays in Boston. He's from Boston. Went to BU, so you'd have to imagine that he is just devastated that he's missing this game, unfortunately. And as someone who roots for the Bruins, when I'm not rooting for the Blackhawks, obviously hope that he's okay. Love Charlie McAvoy a ton. Love his hit on Connor McDavid, his first hit, completely right before the first goal the USA scored, completely changes the momentum. Just completely just decks Connor McDavid. Tells him, you know what, have a nice seat on the ice, please, and just levels him. It was insane. And it was just like, yeah, this tournament is just absolute bonkers. And Davian, of course, I have the USA as well. Yes, they're without McAvoy. Yes, they've been without Quinn Hughes, and they're without him again. But the U.S. It's the U.S. and the U.S. will beat Canada once again. Where the we're not getting a repeat of the 2010 Winter Olympics. I was 7 when that happened. I have no recollection of it, but I'm sure I was devastated, maybe, and I will not be that devastated once again. And Davian, as someone who root for the Bruins in my pastime when I'm not rooting for the Blackhawks, so Jordan Binnington wins a big crucial game again in Boston at TD Garden, I might crash out. I cannot see Jordan Binnington rob me of happiness again. So I'm all for the US. Hopefully they win, and we'll see what happens. Let's move over to the other hot topic of late, and that is the NBA All-Star Game. We talked about it a little bit first, but now let's get into it more in depth. And this was just, it just feels like people just like, if it's hard to get into something when the athletes seem to not care. The fact that LeBron James, and we all know I am a certified LeBron James hater. Yes, I'm a LeBron hater. Like, yes, obviously I'm going to talk trash about him whenever I get the chance to. But last minute to be like, oh, my foot hurts, I can't participate anymore. You're getting paid $50 to $60 million a year, and you're saying, "Oh, I have foot soreness, so I can't shoot threes or play no defense in a 3-on-3 tournament."
No,
Like, I'm
Rafi,
sorry,
come
these
on. No,
NBA
Rafi.
players are
You just said yourself
incredibly
this game
privileged.
doesn't matter, so of course, why would he want to play? I mean, look, I,
I'm just
I
saying,
love
it's
LeBron.
on the
He's a
players
recruit
to
team. He's
make
a
it
first ring.
matter.
When you're goal and when you're over 40 years old, right, and you're going for you're trying to win the championship, right? You're trying to go all the way. You just got Luka on your team. Why would you risk playing a meaningless game? I mean, Rafi, the thing is, the issue is not the fact that LeBron didn't want to play. It's the fact that the NBA couldn't convince LeBron to play. There's so many other players that didn't play or didn't play as much because this game has no value. You win like what, 500 grand if you're the winning team. To these guys, it's pennies at the end of the day for a lot of them. So honestly, what we saw is that the rising stars of people who are there, the players who played part of the Rising Stars team versus the G League team, that was a very exciting game because those players are playing for the G League players were playing for a roster spot. They knew this is the only time they'll be able to really shine again, playing against NBA competition, and they did, right? So at the end of the day, I think there is some good things that came out of this format, but at the end of the day, I 100% agree with you that the NBA did not do enough to convince their star players to play the same way that the NHL was able to.
So, Damian, I will ask you this as the person who knows ball more than I do, as the kids would say, and technically I'm still one of those kids, but still, what the lingo is. How, and this is a massive question, and I don't expect you to answer this in like a direct, like, this is my forced stage plan to fix the NBA All Star game. But if there was something you could, like, what do you think would be the best way to incentivize the players so they care more about All Star Game weekend while also having it be a benefit to the league? Because I feel like that's the thing that the NFL has struggled with. They've talked to their top players. What do you guys want? Oh, we kind of like the games. Oh, let's just make it flag football. We all have seen the Sean Taylor Pro Bowl highlight where he just completely, I forgot who the quarterback is, but he completely just smokes the quarterback who's on a QB draw or QB run. That's been, if that happened in a flag football, if that happened in this past Pro Bowl, people would be up in arms about, like, this is terrible. How could they do this? This is supposed to be fun. The Pro Bowl has gone completely just to the players, and like they're playing like a flag football game. I haven't watched Pro Bowl in years. NBA All Star Game is going down that same path. So I ask you once again, Davian, what's in your mind right now? What are you thinking that can incentivize the NBA players, the NBA stars, to want to go to this? Because the NHL has had this problem before. They've had it with All Star games in the past. You can't replicate the Four Nations Faceoff in my mind with the NBA. You can't. A lot of people are like, oh, we can just get like USA, Canada, France, like, and have these countries. I don't know. I don't know ball enough. But David, what are your thoughts? Do you think
Yeah.
something like that would be beneficial? What are your thoughts on NBA All Star Weekend? How do you think the NBA can make it better? and make the players want to join?
Yeah, simple. It's Team USA versus international team. Simple as that. I mean, I think that's something that the players want to see, right? The country wants to see that. Does if you put all of the best international players on a singular team together, are they able to beat Team USA? Right? Everyone wants to see that. I think in some ways. Also, get rid of this like score cap of like, oh, once you score like 42 points, that's it, game's over. Like, we don't want to see pickup basketball. Show us a real game. That's what we want to see. I think you have that, and then you also have the G League players play the rising stars, like the rookies. I think that's gonna be. I think that's an amazing opportunity for the G League players to really show and prove themselves, and potentially fight for a roster spot, while the rookies kind of show why they're the next face of the league. You continue with the dunk contest, continue with the 3-point contest, get rid of the skills challenge, and do one-on-one pickup basketball instead. That I think is the perfect solution. I also think with the 3-point contest, one thing you bring back is like a Steph Curry versus Sabrina Ionesco, or maybe you do like Caitlin Clark against somebody like trying to think, or like against someone like Trey Young, like, but like come show, like, get the WNBA involved a bit as well, because these are sharp shooters on the in the WNBA that can really shoot the three like very very well. And we saw that last year when Sabrina Ionesco went head to head against Steph Curry. It was not a blowout by Steph Curry. I mean, they're amazing shooters. Like, yes, of course, there's going to be a physical discrepancy between the WNBA and the NBA, which everyone knows about. But shooting a three is still, anybody can really do that if you're good at it.
Yep, except for me. I cannot. I mean, I like chucking up threes. Now, my 3-point shooting percentage might be honestly worse than Shaquille O'Neal's. So,
Rafi, staying
yeah,
at 5'4",
definitely not.
I actually have an elite 3-point shot. I'm like, I'm the next Mooksy Bogues, actually.
David, you told me you were 6'4" in confidence.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Anyways,
exactly. Not bad,
moving.
not bad, not bad. Scratch that.
I have not met David yet in
Look
person, so
again.
for
I've
all
been
I know,
I've been
he
really
could be
tripping
six
over my
four.
words today, guys. I'm so sorry.
Schrodinger's Davian. Is Davian 6'4"? Is he 5'4"? We don't know.
Yeah.
It could be
Yes,
one or
in the
the other. We'll
comments
find
section
out at
down
some point,
below.
though. When I come to New York City, we'll do some reporting and see how tall Davian actually is, as
Yeah,
Davian trembles in his boots right now
indeed.
about what could possibly be revealed about those findings. Moving on to less ridiculous comments and less ridiculous commentary. NFL free agency starts up in a couple weeks. So with that, let's go through some of these top players that are likely that might hit the open market, and let's give some thoughts on where we think if they're gonna wind up staying with the team on a contract. I guess a franchise tag is a contract, but if they wind up just getting franchise tag for the year, maybe get traded, or if you think that they're just going to walk and go right to free agency. I want to start with one of the heavier players, one of the hotter topics, because this guy, here's a guy, not Patrick Mahomes, but here is a guy who had a breakout year by many people's standards last year, took a team that I had as a 5-win team all the way to the playoffs, unfortunately played his two worst games, the last two games of the season when the lights were the brightest versus the Detroit Lions, and then followed that up with a poor performance versus the Rams where he may or may not have been seeing ghosts again. And that's Sam Darnold. And a lot of people were saying, you know what, he went from potentially getting like $50 million on the open market. Now he probably is going to get only 30. Now, if I was given $30 million, I'd be pretty happy. But anyways, I get it. Obviously, it's a business and the market value of quarterbacks. But anyways, Davian, the Vikings are in a predicament right now. Sam Darnold, breakout year, clearly fits with Kevin O'Connell's system. JJ McCarthy, unfortunately, was out for the year, got injured in training camp, didn't really see him play at all. Do you go and say, Sam Darnold, we'd like for you to bridge, and then you let JJ McCarthy fully recover, maybe sit behind Darnold for another year or two? He's like 22 years old right now, 21, 22 years old, so he's still really young. Or do you look to move on from Sam Darnold, maybe tag him and trade him, or just let him walk? What are your thoughts on Sam Darnold? What do you think kind of happens here between the Minnesota Vikings and Sam Darnold? Because I think that's, in my mind, one of the top stories of this upcoming NFL offseason.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really big question, and it really goes down to what the Vikings want to do with their salary cap. The Vikings currently have a salary cap right now of around 61 to $65 million, which sounds like a lot, but really isn't in this kind of day and age where there's so many players that really are wanting a lot of money. So I think the best idea what you do is you sign if Sam Darnold's willing to sign for a cheap deal, you do that. See how he plays, and then you trade him. I don't think you franchise tag him and then trade him because I think the franchise tag would be pretty expensive. But the franchise tag is a reasonable like under 20 million.
Right.
I think that's something, of course, you could consider. Um, I like JJ McCarthy. I think he played well until of course, he had that season-ending injury. I think that there's a system built around him that will do very well, and I feel like Sam Darnold is a good quarterback, but I feel like anybody else could have done well in that role. And I feel like there's so many quarterbacks that will be floating around in the upcoming years who are like veterans who can still perform, but just need like a good system around them. So I wouldn't if I'm the Vikings, I'm letting Sam Darnold go or I'm trading him. I'm not signing him to a
Yeah.
very long term
I
contract. He's not the future of the Vikings.
Yeah, I agree. And even with the large cap increase, I do agree with you. Kevin O'Connell's system is very quarterback friendly. So having a backup quarter, like obviously you don't want Daniel Jones to be your starting quarterback. Don't get me wrong, but having him be your backup quarterback, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. And I trust Kevin O'Connell at this point with what he's done with Sam Darnold and quarterbacks he's worked with in the past to say, you know what, backup quarterback. If they can find a guy who's maybe a fringe starter, pick him up somewhere again, like a Daniel Jones, who they currently have on the practice squad, then do they necessarily need Sam Darnold? He's a great insurance policy, but I agree. It's probably time to hand it off to JJ McCarthy now. And again, it's you don't need just because you get rid of Sam Darnold doesn't necessarily mean JJ McCarthy is given the QB1 job right off the bat. You can still again keep Daniel Jones for another year. You can find another quarterback in free agency because there's going to be a plethora of those fringe starting type of quarterbacks. So you can find one of those guys and then have a bit of a quarterback battle. In worst case, Jaden McCarthy needs a little bit more time. Well, you have a stopgap for the year or another year as well for Jaden McCarthy because once again, as I said, he's very young. So I agree with you. I think he likely will walk and go to free agency. I think the Vikings will likely do right by him. And again, Davian, you're right. A tag for a quarterback for most players, it's reasonable to expect a tag and trade if they're not brought back rather than just hitting the open market. But for quarterbacks, you're not going to tag Sam Darnold $50 million for the year. The Vikings are looking to be a contender again, so it just doesn't make sense to me. Let's move on to another quarterback who recently is looking like he's going to become a free agent, and that's Aaron Rodgers. Davian, what do you think is going to happen with Aaron Rodgers? Where do you think he's going to go? He's obviously not the same Aaron Rodgers that won back-to-back Super Bowls back-to-back MVPs. Pardon me. But where do you think he winds up going? He obviously didn't have an ideal time with the Jets. Do you think he goes to the Vikings? I'm sorry. That would be too funny
I mean,
if he
like,
wound up on the Vikings.
yeah, I mean, Rafi,
I
but that
highly
that is a
but
consideration, right? I mean, you talked about a fringe starter. That is Aaron Rodgers. Who else? Look at Jordan Love. He sat behind Rodgers for 2 years, and look at him now, right? He's the perfect mentor for any young quarterback. Of course, it didn't work out for Zach Wilson, but I don't see why you wouldn't sign him if you're the Vikings. I think Rodgers will find a place that suits him well. It could be the Steelers. Uh, it could be the Saints. There's a lot of opportunities out there for him. Even the Browns, with Deshaun Watson, very injury prone and whatnot. So I mean, there's so many other quarterbacks out there that I think they'll end up somewhere because there are a lot of QB needy teams. I mean, even the Jaguars might consider Rodgers. I mean, Trevor Lawrence hasn't been performing all that crazy well. So I think Rodgers will find a home where we'll be seeing him start some games next year.
yeah, honestly, Steelers fans are not going to like this, but Aaron Rodgers to the Steelers makes a lot of sense to me based upon what the Steelers kind of do. We saw them pick up Russell Wilson last year. It doesn't look like they're keeping Russell Wilson or Justin Fields, which makes me just question their entire philosophy of what this last offseason was for them figuring out their quarterback situation. Also, just want to mention too for those Steelers fans that Kenny Pickett, you were right. Kenny Pickett is a Super Bowl winning quarterback. He did take a team from Pennsylvania to the Super Bowl, and he did throw a pass in the Super Bowl, just as all Pittsburgh Steelers fans had been saying when he was drafted in the first round a couple of years ago. But anyways, I just think Aaron Rodgers going to Pittsburgh under Mike Tomlin, I just feel like that's just it makes sense to me. I can't really explain why, but it's just something that I feel like the Steelers would do.
Yeah.
And David, you mentioned there's going to be a lot of QB need teams this year. And with that in mind, and again, there's really only two quarterbacks that I consider maybe like Shador Sanders and Cam Ward are likely going to be thrusted into QB1 roles. I don't think. I think honestly, I'm not a big fan of either of them in the sense that I would have them as a day one starter. I think it would be good to let them develop and sit for a little bit before they start their NFL career. So when you take that into account, and then you take into account the abundance of quarterback QB needing teams, I don't think it makes sense for Aaron Rodgers to go to the Vikings. As funny as that would be, I think there's a high chance that he can get a starting job for elsewhere where he is the starter. Because I'm sure the Jordan Love situation would rub him the wrong way. And if he goes to Minnesota, he's going to see JJ McCarthy as, oh, he's just going to come and steal my spot, anyways, which is true. But I don't know. Moving on, let's get into one of the top wide receivers and truly will be one of the most sought after players this upcoming offseason if he does for sure wind up leaving his team, and that's T. Higgins, who there's been a lot of words about if he's going to stay in Cincinnati. It's they still have to pay Jamar Chase. David, do you think T. Higgins winds up being a tag and trade candidate? Because I think that's probably the most likely outcome of the T. Higgins and Cincinnati Bengals dilemma right now.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, screw the Bengals for thinking about tagging him. I just don't think they have the money to afford him. I know Joe Burrow thinks that they do, but honestly, it's just because the Eagles have been able to draft very, very well, and for the Bengals to be able to copy that format, they would need to draft very, very well, which I just don't think they'll be able to do. So at the end of the day, I think T. Higgins is gonna be a New England Patriot. That's my honest belief. I really think that the Patriots are very gung ho about getting a wide receiver one, and we are a team with a very large salary cap that can give him the money that he wants. So I see T Higgins ending up as a New England Patriot. That being said, it really depends on how the Bengals play this game, whether they play dirty or not. So honestly, yeah, I think I see him as his tag and trade candidate, Rafi. I really do. Um, I mean, there's a lot of teams that need wide receivers out there, so like the Commanders would love to have him, I'm sure. So we'll see what happens, but I really hope he ends up as a Patriot, as saying this as a Patriots fan.
100%. And you'd have to imagine too that if they're able to get Macmillan, I'm playing on his first name, Macmillan from Arizona, potentially too with their I believe Damien, correct me if I'm wrong, fourth or fifth overall pick, whatever they're
Yeah,
picking,
correct.
but their
Yeah,
high first round pick. If you're walking out of NFL free agency with T. Higgins and then you're walking out of the draft with McMillan, I know the Patriots rightfully so have gotten dragged a bit for their wide receiver development over the past couple of years. But if you have those two guys as your 1-2 punch, that is an
yeah,
incredible setup for
agreed.
Drake May, and you're really setting them up for success going forward. So I really like that fit as well. T. Higgins, another team that this ESPN article has is Washington Commanders. The Commanders are flooded with cap space. They're clearly a all-in team now after a amazing campaign by Jane Daniels, and T. Higgins with Terry McLaurin would also just be absolutely insane. So I think the Commanders are another team too that I'd like to consider. Before we close, David, are there any under the radar players that you think are likely to hit free agency that you think if they find the right team, they might be a breakout candidate for next year, or just an under the radar signing that
Yeah, I mean Justin
or
Fields, if a team actually gives him a chance for once, I think he's gonna be a QB1 player. I think he's gonna have like a Geno Smith level type comeback. Um, there's also just a lot of other players. Mekhi Becton is going to be one of the most paid offensive linemen, especially after the performance he put up in the Super Bowl. Stephon
move
Diggs,
to guard worked.
yeah, I mean Stephon Diggs, he's a player that people haven't heard about in a minute, just because he hasn't been doing too great down in Houston, but he's still a serviceable wide receiver that I think can do great stuff for a lot of teams. Najee Harris on this is a free agent. whether the Steelers stick with him, which I think they should because he's been a very, very consistent player besides his injuries. I mean, there's a lot of players out there that I think can really do a lot for a lot of these teams. And there's a lot of QBs and a lot of QB needy teams like the Titans, the Giants, right? These are two teams that I think that can sign some of these quarterbacks and they can really make a difference for these teams while they continues to prepare their uh, rookie quarterbacks that they end up drafting. And it really, how the free agency shapes out will really will really tell the story of how the draft will shape out. Will we see Jackson Dart going in the top 10? Who knows? Will we see Shador Sanders going in the top 10? Cam Ward? Will we see all of those QBs going in the top 10? Really depends on what these teams do right now because, well, a lot of teams are starting to notice that the best quarterbacks aren't don't always need to be taken in the first round early on unless they're a generational quarterback. And these quarterbacks are very good, but we don't know if they're generational yet. We still need to wait for the combine. We still need to analyze the tapes because I know I haven't. I know Raffi, you haven't, since you've been, so gung ho focusing on the struggling Blackhawks. So, once we do those analysis, we'll come back with the NFL mock draft. But really, nobody can say anything about the mock draft until after free agency, I think.
David, all I'm just gonna say is if you had Connor Bedard on your team, you'd be pretty in touch with the Blackhawks too. Blackhawks start back up again on Saturday. Why? Why? But anyways, we'll be here to discuss all the great stuff that's going on in the NHL and around the sports world. As you mentioned, Davian, there's plenty of high-end draft prospects that we have to catch up on and look into. So we'll be talking about that going forward as well. So for all that stuff, everything in the future sports wise, March Madness just around the corner. Oh my gosh, I've been saying this for a couple weeks, but now we keep getting closer and closer. It's like Christmas Day anticipation. So make sure you subscribe to the channel, like this video, keep in touch. We'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on the contents that was discussed in this podcast. And yeah, for Davian, I'm Raffi. We hope you enjoyed this edition of the Benchwarmer Sports podcast. Have a good one. Enjoy the Four Nations Faceoff Championship game, Canada USA. Hopefully, when you guys are watching this, the USA did win, which I believe they likely will. So for that, that's really it for this edition of the podcast. And yeah, have a good one.
Peace.